Hi, I'm Pastor Chris, and welcome to the Walking the Way podcast, Reasons to Believe. Today, is the Bible historically reliable? Is the Bible merely a collection of myths? Is it a legend passed down through generations and changed over time? Can we trust the translations of the Bible as it has come to us today? Or is it an actual historical document, actually backed up by historic evidence? Let me give you a few solid reasons you can trust the Bible as a historic document and not merely as a religious document, although it would be supremely valuable even simply as a book of great wisdom. But it is more than that. The Bible has more manuscript evidence than any other ancient book. The Bible has more manuscript evidence than any other ancient book, and the manuscript evidence is a primary tool used by historians and archaeologists and those seeking to understand the past when they come to consider that which has been written. When historians evaluate the ancient document, they look at how many copies we have and how close those copies are to the original writing. This helps historians to determine if the document has been faithfully preserved. Because obviously, if the document has been faithfully preserved, it lends great weight and credibility to the contents of that document. It's interesting to note that the Bible, especially the New Testament, blows away every other ancient document. It just blows it out of the water completely. The New Testament has over 5,800 original or extant Greek manuscripts, 10,000 in Latin, and more than 25,000 Greek documents of the New Testament in total of all of our ancient copies. Now, when compared to Homer's Iliad, for example, which has around 1,800 manuscripts, or Julius Caesar's Gallic Wars, which has fewer than 250 copies, the New Testament gives far greater manuscript evidence as to its reliability. The time gap, for example, between the original and the earliest copies that we have of the New Testament is only 50 to 100 years. So the time of the writing of what we have is only 50 or 100 years from the actual events. That sounds like a long time, but the time gap for Plato's writings, which no historian doubts whether they are of historic and ancient and antique origin, is about 1,200 years. You see, what we have in New Testament manuscripts is early and was written by eyewitnesses. Dr. William Lane Craig puts it this way: the textual evidence for the New Testament is so much greater than that for any other ancient document that to doubt its reliability is to throw into chaos our entire understanding of ancient history. This means that if you trust other ancient books like those of Plato or Aristotle or Homer, for example, you should trust the Bible even more. Point number 2, archaeology confirms the Bible's accuracy. Another test of historic reliability is archaeology. And guess what? Archaeology has consistently confirmed the Bible's historic accuracy. It's important to note that not everything of a historic nature in the Bible has been proven by modern archaeology. However, it is equally important to note that no archaeological discovery has ever contradicted the biblical historical accounts. For example, the Dead Sea Scrolls, which were discovered by a shepherd boy throwing a stone into some caves in Qumran in the Holy Land, were discovered between 1947, when that event happened, and 1956, as they finished excavating those caves where ancient monks had lived, recording and transcribing with great care and great diligency the biblical record. The Dead Sea Scrolls contain copies of the Old Testament going back more than 1,000 years earlier than previously known manuscripts. Now, this is incredible enough, but when compared to modern copies, the text is 99.5% identical, with the variations only being with regard to spelling and punctuation, those sorts of things, with only the most minor variation, nearly 100% accuracy, and those not affecting the meaning of the text. It is a gift, I believe, from God to confirm that when we open the pages of our Bible, we are reading the exact same content that was given and written down and recorded in very far antiquity. This proves the Bible was faithfully transmitted over time. Perhaps in another Reasons to Believe video, we can just talk about the great care and diligence that these scribes took in preparing themselves to transmit what they believe to be sacred text. What about the Hittite Empire? The Bible mentions the Hittites dozens of times, and for centuries, skeptics said they never even existed. And then in the early 1900s, archaeologists discovered entire Hittite cities confirming the Bible's account. What about Pontius Pilate? Prior to 1961, there was no historic record, no archaeological artifact had ever been discovered which gave evidence that this Pontius Pilate, governor of that region under the Roman Empire, had ever even existed. But then that changed in 1961 when a stone was found in Caesarea Maritime inscribed with Pilate's name and his title, proving that Pilate was a real historical figure. Charles Spurgeon put it this way: "A great many learned men are defending the Bible. If only they would let it defend itself. It is like a lion. Let it loose. It will defend itself." Point number 3, even non-Christian historians tell us about the events of Jesus' life and those biblical events that we have come to understand. Not only does archaeology confirm the Bible, but even non-Christian historians like Flavius Josephus, he was a Jewish historian, writing from between 37 AD and 100 AD, he wrote this: "At this time, there was a wise man called Jesus. He was one who wrought surprising feats. He was the Christ. And when Pilate condemned him to be crucified, those who had loved him did not cease to do so." What about Tacitus, the Roman historian who was writing about the same time? He said, "Christus," that is Jesus, the founder of the name Christianity, was put to death by Pontius Pilate, procurator of Judea, in the reign of Tiberius. So he sets it in the timeline of the reign of a certain Roman emperor, giving us the ancient context for these events. Jesus, according to these events, these records, even extra-biblical, even non-Christian historians, he was a real person. He was crucified under the real person, Pontius Pilate, and his followers continued to worship him even after his death, proclaiming that he had been resurrected, which we'll get to in another video, reasons for the resurrection. Even skeptics on these historic grounds really have to admit that Christianity doesn't just pop out of nowhere. It's not an invention of the modern era or some kind of sect of a cult that somehow just gained traction and has no basis in history. According to these things, which are proven, which modern archaeological techniques and methods have uncovered, Jesus was a real person, really crucified under the real Roman governor of that area of Judea, Pontius Pilate, and his believers, his followers, continue to worship him as resurrected Lord after his death. The Bible was written close to the events it describes. This is point number 4, and we'll conclude with this for today. Unlike myths that develop over centuries, the New Testament was written within the lifetime of eyewitnesses. For me, this is a tremendous apologetic confirmation, powerful philosophical argument, and historically valid reason to believe the New Testament in terms of its account. Paul's letters were written only 15 to 30 years after Jesus' resurrection. The Gospels were written only 40 to 60 years after Jesus' life. Eyewitnesses were still alive who could have refuted these things. However, we have an account of the New Testament and all kinds of extra biblical other accounts of what happened, but we have no account of accurate, reliable refutations of the life of Jesus from that era, though he appeared, according to the Gospels, to more than 500 people in addition to the disciples, and yet we find no evidence, no historic record of anyone ever having gone and found the body, produced it, and proven. You see, the Gospels say these things happened, and at the time of the writing of the Gospels, they say many of those who saw these events are still alive. It was an invitation to refute the historic reliability of these things, and yet it was not done. C.S. Lewis, a former atheist who became a defender of Christianity, put it this way: I have been reading poems, romances, vision literature, legends, and myths all my life. I know what they're like. I know that not one of them is like this. The Gospels don't read like some myth, like some fairy tale, or like something that would be nice if it had happened. The Gospels read as historic accounts, and you and I, consequently, can trust the Bible on these and many other grounds. Today, I would encourage you to ground your faith in the New Testament, in the biblical revelation, which is historically reliable. God bless you today. Amen.